Hey guys, my name's Alphie and I'm a third year medical student. And I recently uploaded a video about a week in the life of a third year medical student. So with interviews coming up, I wanted to make a short video to give some general tips about how you could do better in the interview. When I applied to medical school in 2015, I applied to places in both the UK and Hong Kong. Now, the interview process was actually very similar in both places, so the tips I'm going to be giving you are based on those experiences. So with that in mind, let's jump straight into it. So my first tip for you guys is to make sure that you can identify what type of interview you're going for. So for medical school, that's typically an MMI or a panel interview. Now in my experience, I only had to do one MMI interview and the rest were panel. So despite this, the tips I'm going to be giving you can still be applied to both situations. So it's really important to understand the differences between the types of interviews, because a panel interview is more like an extended conversation, whereas an MMI is broken down into different stations. So one tip I can give for MMI interview is make sure that you don't let one bad station affect the rest. What I mean by that is, because the MMI interview is broken down into different stations, the examiner at your next station won't know how you performed in your last one. So try and go into each station with a fresh mindset. So my second point is to think about how are you going to sell yourself. The whole point of an interview is to essentially sell yourself. And this applies to interviews for medical school, for jobs, and many other things in your future as well. Now, in terms of selling yourself, you're actually not too new to this as you might think. Just think back to your personal statement. Your personal statement was a written form of you trying to communicate to the university or the school why they should take you. Now, don't go from this in the interview with the perspective of why you're better than so-and-so. You don't want to get muddled up and caught up in comparing yourself to other people. You want to go from it from the perspective of why you are special and why they should take you. So, is it because I have a good work ethic? Or is it because I'm kind? Or is it because I'm patient? Or maybe it's because I care about people. Whatever it is, you need to be able to communicate these characteristics clearly to the interviewer. Now, one thing you have to do on top of that is give evidence of why these characteristics represent you. And what I mean by that is, let's say you had a really good work ethic. If you gave an experience of a time when you've demonstrated this, then it gives a much better picture to the interviewer of why this represents you. Now, going back to the main point about selling yourself, one thing you should try to do is link whatever characteristics you're trying to say about yourself. So let's say I said I was really patient, and try to link that to why that makes you a good medical student, and in the future, why that makes you a really good doctor as well. Now, this is important because the medical school wants you to understand what it takes to become a good medical student and a good doctor. Because someone who's aware of this has done their research and understands the sacrifices and the difficulties that people have to go through to get into medical school, to go through medical school, and to ultimately become a doctor. Now, regarding your personal statement, one thing you have to make sure you do is to go through your personal statement before you go for the interview. Now, on your personal statement, you might have said that you've read this paper, or maybe you've read this article. One thing you want to avoid is claiming that you've read something but not actually reading it. So whatever you said you've done, go through it and think about what sort of questions that the interviewer could ask you on certain bits of your personal statement. Because that's one of the biggest things, that's one of the biggest sources of information you've given to them beforehand. So my third tip is to think about why you've picked this particular medical school. Now, there are a bunch of medical schools out there, so every one of them is amazing in their own right, but you need to be able to explain why you've picked this certain medical school instead of other ones. Now, that could be from different reasons, like for example, at this university, they teach medicine with PBL, which is another way of saying problem-based learning, and you really like that because that gives you independence to your learning. Or maybe it's because, at this university, they teach anatomy using cadavers, which is something which not every university gets to have. Now, whatever the reason is, you just have to explain why this school really appeals to you. So my fourth tip is on what topics to look at before you go for the interview. Now, people get really scared about what sort of things they should read up on before they go, and I can just tell you that the medical school isn't expecting for you to know everything. They just want you to have a good awareness of what's going on in the world. And so some things which you can do to improve in this aspect is to look at the large medical issues that are happening right now. So, you could look at antibiotic resistance, or you could look at, the use of stem cells. Whatever the topic is, don't worry, they're not expecting you to know everything about it. They just want you to have a good awareness of it. Another topic which I think would be really helpful for the interview is the 4 pillars of medical ethics. Now, the 4 pillars include beneficence, non-maleficence, justice, and autonomy. Now, these 4 pillars of medical ethics are really useful whenever you're answering questions related to patient scenarios which they might give you. And you can use this to help answer that, and it makes your answer a lot clearer and more concise. And so these are really useful for patient case scenarios. Now, the last topic I would recommend going through is looking at the healthcare system from where you're from and from where the medical school is. Now, in some cases, this might be the exact same place. But for me, I was applying to UK medical schools, and I'm from Hong Kong. So I had to learn a bit about how the NHS worked and how Hong Kong's healthcare system worked. And this was really useful because I actually got asked a question about this, and they were asking me to compare how one system may be better than another, and vice versa. So I'm assuming that anyone who's watching this video is either interested in applying for medical school, or is waiting for an interview, or has an interview. Now, if you're in that last group, one thing I wanted to say is have some faith in yourself, because the whole process of applying to medical school is incredibly competitive and stressful. And getting an interview, what that means is there's a medical school out there that believes that you have everything that it takes to be a great medical student. And they're seeing this all on paper, on your CV and your personal statement, and all the interview is just proving what they saw on paper to be true. Now, if everything that you said in your CV and your personal statement, is actually you, then this will be a breeze. So don't worry about it. So before I wrap this video up, I want to share one resource that I use, which I found really useful during the preparation time that I had before the interviews. And that's actually this book by ISC Medical, which you can get off Amazon, and I can put the link for that in the description box below. This book is really good because it provides a bunch of questions, a bunch of answers, which really provide a good foundation for your interview preparation. And that's what I did. I used this as a foundation, and I added my personal thoughts and opinions on certain questions to it after. And now essentially, what you want to be able to do by the end of all this preparation is be comfortable with any sort of question or issue or scenario that they might throw at you. And the only way to do this is to just practice. So I recommend practicing with your friends or your family or whoever is interested in asking you some questions. So that wraps up my video, and I hope you guys all found that really useful. If you have any questions, just leave them in the comments below, and I'll see you guys in the next video.